If you think energy prices are high now, the World Bank has a sobering warning. Figures could jump by another 24% by the end of the year. That's, of course, mainly a result of the war in the Middle East, which has effectively shut down the world's most vital oil transit route. Now, while many African countries are struggling with dry pumps and rising costs, Kenya's capital, Nairobi, is finding a workaround. As DW's Felix Maringa reports, the city is moving away from the pump and looking to locally generated energy to power its growing fleet of electric motorbikes.
Fuel prices have shot up in Nairobi. The motorcycle taxi riders or bodabodas are among the many that are feeling the pinch and paying the price.
We will just be incurring losses because there are customers who will not adjust to the new fuel costs. You charge them based on their previous fares, since they won't be willing to add money to their fares.
Fuel prices should be checked, stopped from going up, because fuel runs the whole economy. When fuel prices go up, business comes to a standstill, people suffer the consequences.
But this is not happening to everyone. In a city short on fuel, a growing number of riders are finding alternatives. Electric motorized units have continued running unaffected despite the surge in fuel prices and dry pumps. This does not exempt them from world's problems, but in one critical way, it shields them from direct shocks caused by the fuel shortages.
As an electric bike rider, I won't be affected. I'll still be at work like everyone else, running an electric bike, so I'm at an advantage because my work doesn't stop.
Electric
bikes are more efficient compared to the petrol bikes because of the costs. The price of fuel is going up. When you compare the distance covered by the battery versus the fuel cost, the prices are still not the same. The battery is still cheaper than the price of fuel.
What began as an experiment is fast becoming everyday transport. Maintenance is simpler, running costs are lower, and adoption is rising fast. Last year, the market share more than doubled. In 2025, electric motorbikes accounted for more than 15% of new registrations in Kenya. And it's a local ecosystem driving the change. African-made electric bikes built for African roads. Spyro is the continent's largest e-bike company. Here, the fuel crisis is translating into a rapidly expanding business.
Since the start of the war, and everybody knows that war is not good for mankind, we have seen, both in terms of inquiries, in terms of the potential and actual conversion of people, more and more people now making inquiries. Then in terms of the projection, I am seeing an even higher number, close to about 40% increase in terms of our sales through the situation being there.
On Nairobi's roads, a quiet switch is being flipped. Charging networks are growing, but not fast enough. Electric bikes still cost more upfront and investment is needed. For many of Nairobi's boda riders, there is no doubt the future is electric and just getting started.
I'm joined now by Hiten Parmer, the Executive Director at the Electric Mission based in Johannesburg, working to accelerate the transition to sustainable mobility. It's good to have you with us, Hiten. Now, we've just seen Kenya is seeing an uptick in electric bikes as fuel prices continue to rise. Is Kenya's a unique case, or is this being replicated across the continent, whether electric bikes, electric vehicles or whatever?
Indeed. So, I think we're experiencing a mobility revolution and an energy revolution within that space. And it's no better time right now when we're looking at the energy security perspective as we're seeing all over the world. Now, in Kenya specifically and East Africa, we're seeing the use of two-wheeler type of vehicles, traditionally petrol motorcycles, that are being used for modes of transport. And what's happened in recent years, we've seen a massive shift towards electric motorcycles and the two-wheelers in that sense. And this is what is really seeing the total cost of ownership being the lower operating costs and maintenance costs that electric mobility presents. And this is what is really driving the market. What's also interesting to see in East Africa is the opportunity within these platforms to localize and have some of these homegrown solutions. So that's a fantastic story to see that is coming out of East Africa.
Right. What about elsewhere where this isn't quite picking up in the same way? Why are other countries struggling to make this transition?
Yeah, so I think it's government has to create the right enabling environment, specifically from the policy perspective. And really what has become a lighthouse for the world is Ethiopia, where the government introduced a full-on ban of fossil fuel imported vehicles in 2024. This is now catalyzed and really accelerated the deployment of electric vehicles across Ethiopia as well. And what is great is that Ethiopia itself as a country has a majority share of renewable energy electricity, which is a great benefit to powering mobility. And when you look at, the current dynamics all over the world and the threat that, energy security, specifically oil, presents, Ethiopia's government made this transition because a lot of the revenue within the country was being spent on importing fuel. So the real motive by the then National Transport Minister was then to improve the trade balance of Ethiopia and thereby reducing the expenditure for importing fuels internationally and thereby powering mobility locally on electric vehicles through the energy that's generated locally. Right. So that's a really great fit scenario in that.
Okay. As you mentioned, a lot of importation of fuel and fuel-powered vehicles. But we've seen this makes these countries vulnerable to supply chain shocks like we've seen in the Iran war. I suppose, wouldn't that also be a problem with electric vehicles? Because a lot of countries will also be importing both the vehicles and their components. So are we not seeing a kind of shift in dependency? Because if supply chain shocks still happen globally, they will still affect the African countries with their imports.
Yeah, so Africa is losing the window of opportunity that electric mobility presents because the global fraternity that is manufacturing these electric vehicles and their components is somewhat exploiting the resources that Africa has in its grounds, from the critical minerals and these energy transition minerals that are in the ground that are being mined and exported out of Africa, being processed there and creating these products in semi-products or finished products in vehicles and batteries and other systems. And then African countries are re-importing this. So we've really got a window of opportunity and really industrialization opportunity to seize across Africa in looking at how do we really transform and create a leapfrog opportunity within the resources in our grounds, within the human capital that we have on our continent, and the expertise that we have to really drive through, the right signals from government in the right policies to drive investment and economic development in our continent and our countries at large, because we can really drive regional development on these mines and then processing of these minerals to drive the manufacturing of these batteries and all the other components that go into whether it's electric bicycles, electric buses, or electric cars as a whole.
I suppose you've already talked about a bit about this, the policy perspective. Maybe you could just sum it up. What should African governments be doing right now that they're not already doing in response?
Yeah, so when we look at, global countries that are really accelerating this, African countries might not have the reserves and financial balance to really incentivize this perspective. But what we realize within that is a immediate measure that African countries can adopt is the supply side mechanisms from a policy. That can be a mandate that is introduced for zero-emission vehicles across the fleet in a country, or activities such as fuel efficiency standards or vehicle emission standards, which add no cost to the government for an immediate effect. And this is what we really need to encourage the African countries to really embrace this mobility and energy transition that is at play globally.
Hiten Parmer, Executive Director at the Electric Mission. Thank you very much for giving us those thoughts.
Thanks so much.